can shape many, many aspects of our lives. Because the way AI works, it has the unique ability to process information, to provide insights, and to alleviate the burden that sort of rote tasks, sort of the drudgery of human life. And with the right values, which is a key point, it can unlock human potential, enabling individuals to become more effective, to become more capable of achieving their objectives, and to become more able to focus on things that they care about. In other words, it empowers people. And ultimately, our nation is about the people who are in it and the strength of our country, which I'm very proud to stand here on the stage to represent. This technology is also a very powerful, not only today but in the future, a very, very powerful tool to ease fundamental scientific advances, which is a really fun subject to talk about. Whether it's beneficial services to populations in need, it can help with humanitarian tasks, help big issues involving transportation and agriculture, as the Secretary said. And it's also clearly going to improve our national security because of the DoD and intelligence community work. And you're going to hear a lot about that today. Now, we are fundamentally optimists about this, and I want to state right up front that we live in a dangerous world. China and Russia in particular have concluded that at the state level, the state that masters AI will accrue tremendous strategic advantages. And they are on record saying this, right? Look it up. So they're prioritizing the development of AI across their many, many organizations in the government and institutions and so forth, and they're clearly making rapid progress. And other nations as well. So we are in a competition. There's no question the game has been set. There's no question this is going on. There's lots and lots of evidence. I don't need to belabor the point in the room, but one thing that I will say, and I don't know if it's true for some of you or not, but most Americans that I've dealt with have an older conception of China. They think of China the way it was 10 or 20 years ago, right? Now, by the way, this is seriously impressive. They went from a per capita income of $89 in 1960 to roughly $10,000 per capita, right? Fastest growth in any part of history in any nation. It spends roughly 88% of what the U.S. does on R&D, adjusted for purchasing power. Pretty interesting. And these people are smart. And the government has ambitions and specific plans and promising billions and billions of funds to surpass the U.S. in key technology areas. Now, I don't know about you, but I think about competition, and I think about, I've done this my whole life. I think many of you have as well. Okay, we got a competitor, and we have to deal with it. And what's interesting is if you look at the most recent announcements, China has announced its intention to lead the world in a broad swath of technology, specifically quantum communications. I'll read the list. Quantum communications, supercomputing, aerospace, 5G, mobile payments. With me? New energy vehicles, high-speed rail, financial technology, and, of course, artificial intelligence, including a goal to lead the world by 2030 in this area. The size and commitment that the nation of China is pushing on engineering and science will have a large impact on the United States, and we need to address it directly. So in that context, the Commission is spelling out a strategy to ensure continued American strength, competitiveness, and security. And when you go through the document and you listen to we will show you where the American exceptions are, the extraordinary levers that we have that are unique. And by the way, they are many, they are not few, but we have to understand them. And whether this is America's competitive advantages in the private sector, our decentralized ecosystem, which is a benefit, our ability to draw upon the world's talent, right, as a talent magnet through immigration and so forth, our system of free inquiry, right, literally the craziness that we deal with every day, the free inquiry of our nation is a strength, not a weakness. And the risk-taking that we've taken as a country to build the industries that have gotten us to this point will help us against the AI challenge. So my point is, these strengths, right, which we complain about all day, these strengths are the strengths that will give us the competitive edge that we need if we emphasize them, if we focus on them at the political, government, industrial, commercial model. So what we think now, and you'll see this in our report, is that our government is unprepared to handle this potential for good or bad. There's a long list, right? So let's start with talent, and we're going to talk about that. There's a national shortage of AI talent. It's particularly severe in the government workforce. Right? This is a well-known problem. Lots of people working on it. It needs to get addressed like now. Our national security departments and agencies, they need a culture change. Right? The old model is not going to work in this, whether I frame it as global competition or innovation economy or whatever you want to do it, it's not going to work. And I think it's time to rethink the way these organizations perceive and approach threats in the age of software supremacy. And by the way, software supremacy, that's us. Right? Let's keep it that way. But others are coming along. And whether it's cyber attacks and attacks on infrastructure, everything you all know about, they're probably going to play a similar role as physical attacks played in the 20th century, we'll see. And in particular, the DoD, we're going to talk a lot about this, needs operational concepts and organizational constructs suited for future battlefields. Right? And this is, again, well established. We just have to do it. Now, our focus here so far has been on the government, but that's not what I think is our I'm not trying to exclude the role of everybody else. We have to do this together. The American system requires collaboration. It doesn't, you can't sort of have one group do it and everyone else sort of go to the beach. And we have a common belief around American values, the free exchange of ideas, free market economy, free flow of people. These are core American values. We have common interests, right, including the development of a workforce that will imagine and create this technology. And a failure to secure our country, or even to secure it in the right way, will affect every American, not just the government. So security is actually important, right? And we should say it right up front, which is why we're here. So we have to recognize that this is a competition and that we have to win, okay? Pretty straightforward. We all understand. Now, we've got to do some things involving investment. We've got to invest in education and enlarging human capital. Right? Makes sense? We have to figure out a way to expand public-private sponsorship of R&D. Other countries have terms where they force it or they have specific terms. We have to sort of make this the norm, right, that people are working together, and we'll talk about this at great length. This also means that we have to keep talented researchers from outside the U.S. in our country because they're working on our behalf when they're here. And we need to open the door for the rest of the world to join and become a permanent part of our tech ecosystem. We need the talent here so they're not elsewhere. We need to figure out a way to do global technology leadership in the ways that I've talked about. The advantage that we have in the use of the English language is not trivial. It's well worth. And what it takes, what U.S. firms need in order to win. Put another way, we need to be first, not second. Okay, it's easy to understand. In global markets and technologies, this report lays out the problem. The next report will have our proposed solutions. Collectively, we will come to those solutions. It's not one of those things where we deliver and then you respond. We have to do this together along the way. And indeed, the Commission has dedicated itself to spending the next year doing that and spending an awful lot of time with the people in this room and the people in your organizations to make sure that this stuff actually happens. And by the way, we need to make sure we take concrete steps to lead in things like 5G, right? Quantum computing, financial services, and other future markets. We need all of that. AI by itself is not enough. We need the other aspects of the ecosystem. Remember the list I read about what China was working on? They got the list right. So we need to focus on then true native AI applications, the ones which are transformative. And by the way, we're the best in the world at that today. But we also need then to successfully deploy them at scale, right? That is perhaps at risk for all sorts of scale reasons, which we're going to discuss. And we need these applications to push the boundaries of what we can do and sort of create this sort of new opportunities, which will create new industries, new educational opportunities, help solve all sorts of diseases and so forth in incredibly powerful ways. We need to emphasize our values, which are openness and our diversity, which are strengths. These are American strengths, and we want them to win. And we need to advance our cooperation with our allies. We need the allies that we've traditionally had to help us provide the necessary ecosystem, partners, and platform to deliver on this globally. And the fact of the matter is that the new trade war is really establishing these global technology platforms that are the key to our continued leadership in this long term. This is what America is about. And I'll give you an example. AI-based medical imaging technologies will be invented in the United States because we have the best people. But they will be sold to more customers, more patients, more doctors globally than in the United States just because of the laws of math. So once you understand that we invent it, but we also have to productize it and productize it globally, you understand the value of these American-developed technology platforms, which are so central to our economic growth. So there are plenty of examples, by the way, where we also need to work with our competitors. Using China as the obvious example, AI-based solutions for global climate challenges, disaster relief, human health. We should, for example, begin collaborative discussions on AI safety, which is roughly, I want the AI to do what we said it was going to do, right? The models perform as advertised. Our final report will offer recommendations to help navigate the trade-off between cooperation and competition. So, for example, are there ways in which I'll use another example in China, are there ways in which we can use some of the Chinese infrastructure within our own, but make sure that it's safe? So this is the nature of our thinking and the approach that we're taking. So my challenge to you, and I'll finish up, is that I think we've laid out this morning, and you'll hear all day, that the challenge is there, the opportunity is there, America has the resources, we have the people, we have entrepreneurs, the technologists, and the academics, and we can't be on the fence. The security and the preservation of our values are shared interests, and we have to accept our shared responsibility. Companies, individuals, universities, academics, government, political leaders, and they have to act in support and in defense of both, right, of what we're trying to do. Work with the government, providing your expertise, and holding them accountable for failures, right, and then helping recognize product. I want you all to participate fully today in any way that you possibly can. We need you as part of our team, and I will say at the end, as Americans, we must win, and I'm absolutely convinced that we will. Thank you very much.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to introduce the first panel of the day, Strengthening Our Core, The Way Ahead for American R&D, and it'll be led by Commissioner Andrew Moore, who chairs our working group focusing on AI R&D. Please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you so much for coming here today. We are having a discussion related to Working Group 1, which is looking at the basic questions around research in the United States. I'm privileged to be joined by 4 people who individually I all have huge respect for as people who've been building up the worlds of artificial intelligence and contributing to the United States in doing so. These are Andy Jassy, Steve Walker, Franz Cordova, and Eric Horvitz. So, technology R&D in the United States has long been driven by a triangular alliance involving companies, universities, and the federal government. It's been this way ever since the days of the Manhattan Project, and it's been a huge benefit to the United States. Artificial intelligence, as we all know, has demonstrably become a huge strategic tool. It's no longer a question of if it's going to be useful, but in the corporate world, in the federal world, over and over again, it has been demonstrated to be a game changer for organizations to be able to produce more effective, safer technology. So we, the human race, we've got this new additional tool to help us, and that's very exciting. And it's not stopping. There are new things coming down the pike from the world of AI, which really raise my hair, if I had hair, in terms of it's what we'll be talking about in artificial intelligence in 2 or 3 years is even more exciting than what we're talking about right now. So while the commercial sector plays a significant role in AI research, we in the Commission are confident that it is not enough. It is insufficient to sustain the US advantages which we've enjoyed over the last 70 years. The government does retain a critical role, especially in supporting basic scientific research and research directly relevant to national security. Many of these exciting things coming down the pike, which are game changers, are currently happening in our national labs and especially in our universities, not entirely in our commercial organizations. What this working group has done since April is we've engaged stakeholders across the our AI R&D environment, people in academia, people in government, and in the private sector. And in doing so, we've come to several key consensus judgments on the research environment. So I'm going to quickly go through the list, and I'm going to ask our panelists to expand on their thoughts around it. Something we'd expected when we started, but we are now confirmed, is that federal R&D funding for AI has not kept pace by almost any metric in terms of the number of researchers, the economic impact, the pie chart of where our competitors are investing research. On all of these, the United States has currently come short. We believe the government needs to reevaluate its AI R&D budget levels, not necessarily running things as business as usual, but potentially being more flexible about the way we invest in these areas if we want to see this continuing wave of innovations coming down the pike. We recommend that the US government identifies, prioritizes, coordinates, and urgently implements national security-focused AI R&D investments. This is particularly important, and as we've been looking through the areas of investment, it's kind of shocking that it's in the national security-related arenas that we're seeing far too little activity. There are untapped opportunities around where we do believe that it is possible to build an AI R&D research ecosystem in the United States, mainly based on clusters and really bringing in the whole country and different segments into this grand challenge. Another of our conclusions is that in many places there are bureaucratic and resource constraints which are hindering the national labs and other federal R&D locations from being able to come to their full potential. And I personally have really seen this in heroic parts of the federal government where folks have had to fight hard, maybe harder on the bureaucracy end than on the technology end, to get their artificial intelligences actually deployed and useful. I and many of my colleagues weren't born in the United States. And we came to the United States because it's the absolute, at least for our generation, it was the absolute center of the world for excellent research. And we believe that it's essential to continue having it so that all around the world, the smartest minds in artificial intelligence aspire to be working in the United States for the United States. So we recommend that law enforcement and academic leaders need to find common ground on welcoming foreign talent while still being really careful about the very real security risks from state-directed illicit activity on American campuses. Officials should recognize that overly broad investigations or blunt restrictions on academic research carry major risks to national security and to preserving our AI leadership. So that's a quick summary of what we're talking about. I'm now going to ask the panelists to help expand on this. Each of them we're going to ask for their perspectives on two central questions. What is the comparative advantage of the US research environment? Where are we with risk or where are we weakening? And where do we see opportunities? The second question is, how does our current R&D environment need to evolve to fully leverage the transformative potential of AI to strengthen our national security? I'm going to now ask my panelists to each take turns with short remarks. And we will begin from me outwards with Andy Jassy.
Thanks. I think that if you look at where we are today, I still think that the U.S. leads in AI research and groundbreaking and foundational research and breakthroughs. I think in significant part because of the amazing universities we have in this country and a lot of the companies who've made very significant investments here. I think we have an unusual amount of talent here, as Andrew referenced earlier, and I think there's an unusual entrepreneurship community in the United States. I mean, most of the even early stage startups today are using machine learning and AI in their early stage businesses. So I think we have a lot of advantages that we've started with, but I think others are catching up. And I think you see it particularly with China and to some extent Russia as well, and they're primarily top-down, government-driven in terms of what's happening. And you know, in the business I was working every day, which is our cloud computing business called AWS, we often get asked, what are the biggest differences between companies that are making a big move to the cloud versus those that just talk a lot about it? And oftentimes, what it really is its alignment at the senior leadership levels at that organization, and then an aggressive top-down goal that forces the organization to move faster than it organically otherwise would. And I think that, you know, in the U.S., we haven't yet taken that mantle of that top-down leadership. We don't have a top-down aggressive goal. We're not funding research in AI like we really mean it yet. We have a start, but not really like we mean it yet. We haven't kind of provided guidance and regulations on how to use the technology in AI so that we make sure we're using it responsibly, but we also get out of our own way with all the debates on how to use it. And if you contrast that, you can look at China, where they are very aggressively driving it from the government top down. You know, they have a very clear incentive and goal to be number one in AI by 2025. They have relatively few limitations and constraints and regulations in how they act. And you know, they view it as a very important strategic initiative to lead in this area because they believe it's the future of really almost everything that we touch in society. And so, you know, I think that Russia may be less expansively than China, but still very big top-down investment to use AI to their benefit in the military. So I think when you get back to our country, we need to pull together a more significant top-down strategy. You know, I think one of our jobs as governments, as a country, as companies, is to try to look around the corner and see what may be coming before it has meaningfully negative impact for our citizens or our customers and whatever we do. And I think you can look at where we are today, and you know, this may not be exactly that Sputnik moment, but you can see there is a huge amount of activity and momentum right now in AI, and we need to look around that corner and pull together a top-down strategy that allows us to invest in this transformative technology the way we should.
Thank you.
Great. Steve Walker, Director of DARPA. I like the title of this panel, Strengthening the Core, because I think our core is pretty strong. I mean, the core, when I think about the core of our R&D environment in the country, I think about how Vannevar Bush first stood it up, right? Academia, the private sector, industry, and government pulling together in this loose federation are development community. Out of that concept, sprang NSF pretty quickly thereafter. Took a little bit longer for DARPA to pop up in 1958 after Sputnik. This sort of loose federation of entities or ecosystem has really served us well through World War II and after during the Cold War. I don't want to change that system. I think it works well, at least from the standpoint of innovation and allowing ideas to come bottoms up, which is really the DARPA model. Hire the best people you can bring into the organization and turn them loose, allow them to fail, measure their progress, but give them the freedom to innovate. That works well for our country, and I think it's working well in the AI domain today. What may not be working as well is some of the seams that have grown up between those different communities for various reasons. And so I think one of the risks or the weak points there in the system that we've used over these many years is building those bridges again between those communities. And in national security and the defense sector, we have the defense industry. We work with them all the time on military application, and that's great, and it works well. But we have a whole commercial sector out there that is really focused on developing AI tools and techniques. And we at DARPA interact with that community as well. But building the bridges a little tighter between the commercial sector and the defense sector on the application side of AI, I think is going to be critical as we move forward. I'm pretty comfortable this country is still innovating better than anybody on the research side. And there is pressure at our academic institutions for various reasons. Talking to Kathleen, who's a DARPA alum before, who's running a department at Tufts Computer Science Department. Lots of students coming on board, which is a great thing. But giving them something to do after they graduate, and not just in the commercial sector, but also the defense sector, I think is going to be important. You said it, Andrew, early on. We want to continue to be the country that attracts the best and brightest people from all over the world. And the last thing we want to do is train them here and have them go home. We want to keep them here if possible, and so that's going to be important. That's a weakness that's popping up that we really need to deal with, I think, as a nation. I can't remember what the second question was.
In fact, you've been super helpful in all of this, but it is the question of how the current R&D environment needs to evolve.
Yeah. So, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, hopefully in the open session, but one of the things we've done in the electronics sector is DARPA has led an effort called the Electronics Resurgence Initiative, which has really, I think, it's about 2 years old, but has really been successful at bridging that gap between the commercial microelectronics companies and the defense sector companies working in electronics who need those devices. Academia is the foundation, working with companies across the board, but working with both sides of that industrial aisle to get the best electronics we can, which is really in the commercial sector now, over to the defense sector for national security purposes. I'd like to explore that, I think, a little bit more for the AI community, because I think it's not as far along.
I completely agree. Yep. So much of AI is now becoming hardware and compute bound. Yes. Dr. Cordova.
Hi. Good morning, everyone. Not to lose my voice with the cold. I am very glad to be on this panel, and especially we've had so many connections on this panel. Let me mention a couple of those first. So Steve and I chair the White House's Select Committee on Artificial Intelligence, and that brings together all the agencies that are involved to talk about what we're doing and how we can grow and do more together. And most recently, DARPA and the National Science Foundation that I had have agreed on a project, $10 million each, to foster work on machine learning together to fund proposals there. And Andrew, of course, is a great role model. I used you, Andrew, earlier this week. I was at both Stanford University and the University of California at Santa Barbara, where they've just launched with Google, the big quantum computer. Andrew is my role model for how universities should change and think about what's a professor. He's gone in and out of universities. He's been a dean at Carnegie Mellon, and now he's back in industry, but he circulates, as do many of the computer and information scientists at our universities in this country. But I think that should be extended to the whole domain of the professoriate, that we should think, get out of our old school models of professors with tenure and so on, and be really encouraging the churn that is so important. I have a figure up here, a slide, which is a famous slide from about the year 2012, a report of the National Academies. It's called the tire tracks slide because they look like tire tracks. But what it is are different industries within the whole computer and information science domain that you can see along the tops of the tracks that are all connected and show the uniqueness of the ecosystem in this country between the government, which funds the long-term investments, and that's the red line that starts very early on, like the National Science Foundation would be a good example, DARPA another. We fund research that we don't even know where it's going to ultimately wind up. As Eric Schmidt himself has said at a commencement address that we often quote, that NSF is where all the interesting things get started. Thank you, Eric. So interesting things get started on those red lines way long time ago, and we invest for a long time. Then industry gets interested in some of the potential applications. Those are the next track over, and starts seeing how those can be blended with other innovations and create products. And then the final line, the green line there, is when businesses develop and become million-dollar businesses and then billion-dollar businesses. And this is something that we have in this country that we should treasure, is that relationship, interrelationship, and that feedback between industry and academia, because that's where what the government is funding, is all these amazing talented university people. So another point that I wanted to make is where NSF's investments are going. We spend about $500 million a year on artificial intelligence, and that 85% of everything we fund goes to universities. That's where the talent is. Some of the long-term programs that we're investing in now have to do with the security and safety of AI and the fairness of AI. So we have a collaboration with the Partnership for AI, which is composed of about 50 industries, and we're funding proposals there on the security and safety, transparency, accountability of AI. And with Amazon, we're funding a large number of programs on the fairness of AI. Another thing that we're funding is one of our big ideas in our strategic framework for future investment, and that's the future of work, because the workplace is going to change, whether you're a school teacher or a factory worker or any occupation. And artificial intelligence lies at the core of that change. In fact, we're fond of saying that for all of the big ideas that comprise our strategic framework, whether it's quantum or genotype to phenotype, the future of work, that it is artificial intelligence, which is the universal connector. And that's why we shouldn't limit ourselves and think about just funding artificial intelligence, because it is so broad, it permeates all our fields, it connects all our fields, it will change. It will change everything we do, not only in the workplace, but in education and how we play, how we think, and work with machines. So the last point I want to make is, in talking about universal connectors, I think about the glue that binds all of the disciplines together. And recently, as I said, I was in Santa Barbara, And that is the home of one person who invented Gorilla Glue, which some of you may have used. And that person turns out to be a friend of mine for a very long time. Our kids played soccer together. And he is a woodworker, and that's why he developed Gorilla Glue. And to me, that is a key example that we talk about wonderful discoveries that are transformative, either in a little space like that kind of glue or a huge space like the AI glue. But it all devolves to people, to individuals that we fund early on to just experiment. And as they need to do things and they need to improve what they're doing, they become inventive. And they use chemistry and physics and mathematics, computer science, all the basics in order to do that. So an emphasis on the workforce and funding the workforce, training the workforce has to be a huge part of how we're thinking about the future. And that's a key goal of the administration and Congress and all of our agencies.
Thank you. Dr. Kotova and Dr. Walker, both of you have been huge champions of artificial intelligence for the United States, and I really want to thank you for that. Our final panelist, Dr. Eric Horvitz.
Yes, so the U.S. is in a very good place. We've had a great history of leadership in creative innovations with AI, going back to Vannevar Bush, J.C.R. Licklider at DARPA, and leadership there. Herb Simon, Alan Newell, John McCarthy, founders of the field of AI. But we could do a lot better. And I see great opportunity with bringing together government agencies, academics and academia, as well as industry to think through next steps in where we go and to address some of the hard challenges and opportunities coming to the fore. As the director of Microsoft Research worldwide, I've grappled with coming up with innovative models to bring together academia and industry, new kinds of positions, new kinds of resources, providing data sets of various kinds to academics and powerful compute that they might not have, for example. Providing homes in industrial environments for academics to understand some of the basic real-world challenges that are being faced in engineering as well as in the hard problem-solving tasks ahead. As chair of the Partnership on AI, I worked with the NSF to think through, as Fran said, this innovative approaches to bringing private sector together with government agencies to fund innovative topics in AI. And thank you very much for you, Erwin, and others for the great job that was done there. I thought I'd mention a few interesting hard challenges in AI today facing us technically to give folks a sense for why we need to bring government, academia, industry together. AI R&D has been on a fabulous run, but we can do more. Today's AI systems are actually rather quite brittle. Blind spots and biases show up all the time in these systems. They are narrowly focused in terms of how they can be applied. In some ways, much more is being said about their possibility than the reality of these systems. But we can make that reality come true over time. We need to give systems, for example, the ability to understand their own limitations, to give them a sense for their own competences in different situations. They need to know what they don't know, especially in high-stakes decision areas. We need to actually understand how to make AI systems more robust to attacks. The more we use AI throughout industry, government, and defense, the more we create AI attack surfaces that others can render useless with adversarial-focused attacks on these systems. So these defenses will require investments in AI technologies themselves, as well as in complementary technologies like security and verification, technologies in computer science outside of AI to make these AI systems better and more robust. And moving into the realm of basic science, where we really rely on academics to think broadly and long-term, it's clear that while we've made great progress, we've made very little. We have very little understanding of many mysteries of what I would call human intellect, mysteries of mind. How is it that people can learn so much without large amounts of labeled data in the wild in an unsupervised way? How can people learn to do one thing by knowing another thing, the idea of generalizing across tasks? And where does all of our common sense come from? This ability to manipulate thousands and upon thousands of facts daily in a very efficient manner. On another front, we need to better understand how to enable people and AI systems to work together collaboratively. Human oversight and controls are a critical foundation of AI in DoD and related national security efforts. And so there's great opportunity ahead on R&D on methods that enable AI and people to work in a seamless manner together, focused around the principle and goal where AI augments and extends human intellect, where we work to mesh the intellect of machine and human to create a better whole. And finally, we need to really understand how to move even today's technologies into practice. It's more difficult than one would imagine to take existing prototypes and even specific solutions and move them or translate them into real-world value-providing services, grappling with legacy systems and pipelines, training, understanding cases where the application of existing technologies is actually relevant and powerful and useful. There's so much that can be done in R&D to make that translation better, more efficient, and effective, so that we can apply the AI technologies, again, even today's technologies in the laboratory, to the real world of healthcare, education, transportation, and defense. And I want to just stress one last thing here to emphasize what Eric Schmidt said in his opening remarks, and Andrew amplified as well. We have to be careful about a Fortress America mentality when it comes to R&D and technical excellence. We need to recognize and preserve the role of our national strength, which comes in the power of free inquiry. Going back to Vannevar Bush, Licklider, and our history of science and technology. So U.S. restrictions to protect national security and intellectual property have to be narrowly tailored to specific threats so that they don't hinder our academic and commercial leadership in AI. You know, the innovation culture that we've long enjoyed in our nation and our values around innovation are at the very heart of our power as a country. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Horvitz. And I want to emphasize that the Commission recognizes the need for this breadth of research, but we are absolutely convinced and have been briefed on very real series of threats and approaches to getting hold of U.S. national security relevant AI by our adversaries. And so we do have to bear that in mind as well. What I'm going to do now is hit the panel up with a couple of quick questions. So I'm looking for like short 30-second answers. And then we're going to open it up. So if you have questions for a panel about the AI R&D infrastructure in the United States, please prepare them, and then that will come. I'm first going to do a couple of questions myself. And the first one's for Dr. Cordova. One thing that I think we all admire is the NSF has launched an effort to establish AI institutes. What impact do you think we're going to get out of this AI Institutes program?
Well, we are launching, we did launch about a month ago a solicitation to the wide community, and it connects 4 of our government agencies, actually, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Veterans Administration, and a couple of the defense branches as well. And we are asking for proposals in 6 different areas for research institutes on artificial intelligence. And I think, and this was from a workshop in which people talked about where are the areas that we should be funding first, research institutes. And the one I remember most is artificial intelligence for physics discovery, since I'm a physicist and want to make discoveries in that realm. But no, there are ones on fairness and security, and a lot of the, I think almost any area that you're working in artificial intelligence could fit under one of the 6 umbrellas. So we're hopeful that the impact is going to be a lot of creativity and innovation. I mean, that's what happens when you launch a solicitation to the wider community, is we don't know exactly what people are going to be producing, but we assume they will be multi-institutional collaborations. There will be collaborations between industry and the university. And we'll see what happens when we get the proposals in. It's just important to get that creativity from out there and to fund and invest in it.
Excellent, thank you. And I absolutely agree that the big industrial pushes in AI all began with the basic research, and pretty much entirely from the United States. I got a question for Mr. Jassy. Oh, okay. Your question for Doc Jassy. You head the largest organization on the planet at the moment for all this transformation of information technology into the cloud. And from that vantage point, I'm sure you've had a chance to form some opinions about what are the national security things that we in the United States should be most be concentrating on when it comes to AI R&D.
Yeah, I think, first, as a number of people said on this panel, we got to make sure that we fund research and education. I think we're underfunding it today, and many of the most important discoveries, not just in AI, but in computing in general, have come from research organizations and our educational institutions. I think if you look at our agencies that are in charge of national defense, we must make sure that they have modern and sophisticated infrastructures. And, I think in this day and age, having the ability to be able to leverage cloud computing with, the way that the cost of storage and compute has radically changed, and then all the services available that allow you not only to save money for the missions you're pursuing, but also to move in a much more agile and fast fashion, especially given what's happening in the rest of the world, is essential. I think there's all this data that exists, and we see this with companies and with the governments that we serve in our business, but it's true for sure in our country, where we have all these data silos, where we have really valuable data that lives in these different places that we need to find a way to pull together so that we can leverage it for analytics and for machine learning and AI in a different way than we have in the past. I think also being able to help our national defense have the right data and the right AI and predictions at the edge, at the battlefield, where you oftentimes don't have time to send a request back to some kind of central place, and where those decisions have to be made in real time is incredibly important. So, I think those are all important things. And I think the last piece is, as everyone has said, I would not, sometimes I think people mistakenly think that we're okay with the investment in this country in AI because you've got these big companies that are making giant investments. And the reality is it's not enough. It has to be a deeply funded partnership between government, academia, and companies.
Thank you. A quick question for Dr. Walker. This question of challenge-based R&D, DARPA has really pioneered that, not only for the US but for the world. And many of my own most exciting experiences in pushing on research has come from those challenges. And I'm excited to see that Jake, for instance, is pushing on national mission initiatives. How do you see the future evolving in terms of mission-based or challenge-based AI research?
Well, thanks. Yes, DARPA's used challenges very successfully. The one everybody talks about was last decade, the self-driving car challenges that led to a lot of what we're using today. The big challenge I see, DARPA's been funding AI research for 56 years now, through the expert system phase, machine learning, which I very much agree with Eric's comment that it's still very fragile and can be manipulated. And now I think the next big challenge for AI was well articulated by you as well, and it's the man-machine, human-machine partnership, and how we rely on machines to help us do our jobs better. This is being incredibly important to warfighters, and we have started a program at DARPA called the AI Exploration Program, which is designed to explore very quickly all aspects of the human-machine partnership. And by quickly, I mean we'll put a solicitation out to the world and promise to look at those proposals that come in to solve a particular problem and award contracts in 90 days or less. That's pretty quick. And we've been successful at doing that now for the last 14 months. Every month a new topic comes out. And we've got a very diverse set of universities, small companies, large companies, working with us on all aspects of this human-machine partnership. And, you know, everything from machines being able to tell the human when they're not competent to do a particular job, to learning with less labels. I think it's called fewer labels now because that was grammatically incorrect. But, you know, the department has a problem. We don't have a lot of data that the commercial sector does. So how do you learn with less data? And having the machine be able to explain itself to the human operator, building that trust between human and machine is going to be incredibly important, especially for the warfighter, if they're actually going to use AI in life or death situations. That is the next big challenge in AI, and that is where we're focused. Do we do a big self-driving car challenge in that space? We're not there yet, but we're exploring these different avenues, and we hope those will turn into bigger programs.
Fantastic. Thank you. And a question for Dr. Horvitz, following on from Dr. Walker's comments about access to data. We did look at the question in the commission of does China have a large advantage because of both volumes of data and perhaps less restrictions on federal use of data? What do you think about the U.S. position on the availability of data?
So let me just say that whether you're China or the U.S. or any nation state or research team, we hear a lot about big data, but we're really in a world of data scarcity when it comes to specific tasks and needs operationally. This means we need to innovate. We need to come up with research programs that enable us to understand how best to leverage models, simulations, data generalization techniques, as well as where we can to transfer or generalize from the data we have to new settings through technologies we refer to broadly as transfer learning. These are all interesting challenge and opportunity areas for AI research. They're all going to require government engagement with scenarios and people and ideas and funding, private sector ideas, because it's more competitive terrain when it comes to understanding how to make the most of our data and to generate new data sets that are specific and aimed at particular applications, and academia for the incredible lifeblood of ideas over the horizon thinking about this. Think about this whole area of taking simulation right now. There's been a rise of this idea of taking physics-based or model-based simulations to generate data, to actually do machine learning in simulated worlds, to become expert at doing that. And then when you take your trained system that learned in a world that might not be full fidelity because it's not the real world, understanding its blind spots and biases to make it as good as it can be in the open world. Again, this is a core research area that we can really excel at. It's going to be important no matter how much data is collected copiously in the stream of operations like behavioral data that we hear so much about the Chinese collecting.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to open it to questions from the floor. You can raise your hand, and a microphone will magically appear in it. Yes, please.